One night in Victorian London, when morality slept. London, 1888. At sunset, the city still pretends to be decent. Clerks spill out of counting houses. Shop shutters rattle down. Church bells drift across the evening haze. Along the Strand, gentlemen in black coats step carefully around puddles. Ladies lift their skirts above the filth, and carriage wheels throw mud against the curb. Everything still looks orderly, respectable, civilized. That is the performance London gives itself before dark. But wait another hour. When the gas lamps begin to glow through the fog, the city changes shape. Not all at once. Not dramatically. More like something hidden beneath the skin beginning to show through. A second London emerges from behind the first. It does not announce itself. It waits in side streets, behind tavern doors, under theater porticos, inside lodging houses, clinic wards, private rooms, police cells. By daylight, Victorian London talks about virtue. By night, it runs on hunger, secrecy, and price. Sex is everywhere in this city, but almost nowhere can it be spoken of honestly. Not in Parliament, not in a drawing room, not in church, not at a respectable family table. So it survives in code words, glances, euphemisms, and cash slipped quietly from hand to hand. And because no one wants to name it, no one wants to protect the people trapped inside it. Tonight, we are walking through that hidden city. Not the London of polished portraits, not the London of moral speeches. The other one. The one that smells of coal smoke, gin, sweat, wet wool, cheap perfume, and sickness. One night. 7 stops. From the bright West End to the hospital ward. From velvet curtains to prison stone. From desire sold as luxury to desire punished as crime. This is not a story about romance. It is a story about what happens when an empire builds its morality on silence. And once you see this London clearly, it becomes harder to believe it ever truly disappeared. Velvet, filth, desire, fear, the city opens its wounds. Stop 1, the Strand at dusk. Evening settles slowly over central London. The Strand is still busy. Omnibuses rattle past. Newspaper boys shout late editions. Theater crowds begin to gather under gaslight. Collars high, gloves pale, faces half golden in the smoke-thick air. If you only stood here, you might believe every word Victorians said about themselves. Order, discipline, family, moral seriousness. But look at the men lingering without purpose, not hurrying home, not entering the theater, just watching. A woman passes in a plain dress and cheap bonnet. Nothing flamboyant, nothing theatrical. She does not need to call out. A pause is enough. A glance over the shoulder, a change in pace. The man follows. No scene, no scandal. No one turns. Everyone understands without acknowledging that they understand. That is how the city works. Vice in Victorian London is not hidden because it is rare. It is hidden because recognition itself would be embarrassing. Respectability depends less on innocence than on refusing to describe what is plainly visible. A clergyman passes within feet of a prostitute and keeps his eyes forward. A constable sees the same exchange and does nothing. 2 well-dressed young men laugh as they head toward a music hall, one of them already drunk enough to become careless before midnight. All around them, the city performs ignorance, and so the night begins. Stop 2, Haymarket, where desire dresses well. By full dark, Haymarket is alive. This is not the London of starvation, not yet. Here the lamps burn bright outside taverns, oyster rooms, theaters, supper clubs. Carriages arrive in a steady line. Fine boots touch wet pavement. Cigars glow in the fog like banked embers. A woman steps from a doorway in silk, too elegant for a shop girl and too deliberate for a lady. She smiles, but not cheaply. What she sells is not urgency. It is atmosphere, conversation, selection, the illusion that the transaction belongs to a better world. Here, sex is wrapped in refinement. Crystal glasses ring softly against one another. Champagne foams pale in candlelight. Piano music drifts through half-open doors. Men who would denounce public vice in daylight now climb private staircases with the calm entitlement of people accustomed to buying what they want. Inside an expensive brothel, nothing is meant to look brutal. That is the point. Velvet curtains absorb sound. Mirrors multiply light. Carpets soften footsteps. A woman trained in wit, fashion, and self-control sits beside a wealthy client and asks about Parliament, racing horses, the season in Paris. For an hour, perhaps two, the entire room conspires to make power feel like intimacy. But luxury is not the opposite of exploitation. It is often its most polished version. The woman's gown may be Paris silk, her gloves may be fine kid leather, her hair may gleam in lamplight. Yet beneath that elegance is dependence so fragile it can collapse in a week. Age a little, sicken a little, lose favor with the wrong man, fall into debt to a madam. Suddenly the velvet becomes a trap. Money does not erase danger here, it perfumes it. A gentleman leaves by a private entrance. His reputation remains untouched. The woman stays where she is, waiting for the next knock, the next glass poured, the next performance of warmth she cannot afford to withhold. Outside, only a few streets away, the city gets colder. Stop 3, 7 dials, where survival has no curtain. Walk east, and the night changes fast. The bright avenues thin. The pavement worsens. The fog seems denser here, as if soot itself has settled lower over the streets. By the time you reach 7 dials, London no longer bothers pretending to be beautiful. The houses lean like exhausted men. Windows are cracked or stuffed with rags. Water runs black in the gutter. Cheap gin breathes from doorways. Here, sex is not dressed for comfort. It is bartered for shelter, for bread, for a bed that may already hold lice and someone else's fever. A girl no older than 17 stands beneath a broken lamp. Her shawl is too thin for the damp. Her boots are split at the toes. She's trying to look hardened, but hunger has a way of making the face look younger, not older. A man stops. He smells of dock work and stale beer. They speak briefly. No seduction, no fantasy. A price is set with the speed of necessity. Nearby, a lodging house takes them in without surprise. Inside, the room is rank with sweat, gin, mildew, and unwashed bedding. Bodies lie in rows. Some snore, some cough. Some merely stare into the dark, too tired to sleep. Privacy here is so scarce, it has become almost meaningless. A torn curtain, a corner mattress, a wall stained by years of damp and smoke. These are the boundaries between one life and another. By morning, no trace of tenderness will remain, only payment. And sometimes not even that. In neighborhoods like this, the body becomes the last possession poverty can still force into circulation. Respectable London likes to imagine vice as a chosen fall. But here, the line between labor and sex is often just one unpaid rent, one dead husband, one lost job, one missed meal. A carriage from the West End could reach this district in minutes. Morally, Victorians pretend the distance is infinite. It is not. It is only expensive. Stop 4. Inside the house, the lie becomes furniture. Near midnight, step inside one of the so-called houses of pleasure. The name itself is a deception. The hall is narrow. The wallpaper is faded under gaslight. Powder and cheap scent hang in the air, trying and failing to cover damp plaster, old tobacco, and sheets not properly washed. Somewhere upstairs, a bed creaks against the wall. Somewhere else, a woman laughs too brightly, then stops too suddenly. A brothel is supposed to represent order. That is the promise. Better than the street. Safer than the alley. Managed. Contained. But look closer. The woman pouring brandy into a client's glass owes money for the dress on her back. The woman upstairs owes for her room. Another owes for cosmetics, for food, for medicine, for laundry, for debts entered carefully into a ledger kept by someone who profits from making sure they are never fully paid. She works to reduce what cannot be reduced. Debt is one of the quietest chains in Victorian London. No iron, no locked ankle, just arithmetic arranged, so escape remains theoretical. And there is no real safety here. Blankets are reused. Water stands stale in basins. Air barely moves. Men arrive from every corner of the city carrying whatever they have touched, swallowed, caught, or concealed. No one speaks of protection because the culture has not learned to value it. No one speaks of germs because science is still years behind the suffering. So disease moves through these rooms faster than rumor. A woman sits alone on the edge of her bed, between clients. Her dress is gaudy, chosen to flatter under dim light. Her face, without performance, is nearly expressionless. Tired beyond complaint. Too young to look this emptied out. She hears footsteps on the stairs and straightens instinctively, as if pulled by a wire. The room around her is designed to imitate comfort. What it really contains is exhaustion for sale by the hour. This is the genius of Victorian hypocrisy. Turn exploitation into decor, and people begin calling it civilization. Stop 5. Harley Street, where desire becomes diagnosis. After midnight, the city's cruelty changes language. Now it calls itself medicine. In a consulting room off Harley Street, everything looks clean, controlled, professional. Shelves lined with bottles, brass instruments arranged with care, a coal fire reduced to a red glow, heavy curtains keeping out the damp. The room belongs to science, or so it claims. A respectable woman sits rigidly in a chair, gloved hands clasped too tightly in her lap. She has been sent here because something is wrong with her, or rather, because the society around her has decided something must be wrong. She is fatigued, restless, sad without acceptable reason, perhaps emotionally volatile, perhaps sleepless, perhaps merely dissatisfied in ways she cannot name aloud. The diagnosis is hysteria. It is a diagnosis broad enough to absorb nearly any female discomfort and vague enough to protect the assumptions behind it. Victorian culture insists that a proper woman has little or no sexual appetite. Purity is built into her by nature. If desire appears, it must be misfiring. If distress appears, it must be uterine. If the body speaks, medicine steps in to translate it into something men find manageable. The doctor explains treatment in calm, respectable tones. Nothing indecent, of course. Nothing shameful. Only a procedure. Only relief. Only science. And yet everything in the room depends on not speaking the truth plainly. The truth is that female pleasure is being handled as pathology, because acknowledging it as human desire would threaten the moral architecture of the age. An oil lamp flickers against polished metal. A mechanical device rests nearby, clinical in its presentation, unsettling in its purpose. The woman's face is pale, composed, distant. Whatever she feels, she has not been given the language to own it. Shame sits beside ignorance. Authority fills the space understanding should occupy. Victorian society does not merely repress the body. It recruits medicine to help do it. When a culture is too frightened to describe desire honestly, it invents diagnoses to preserve the illusion that control is compassion. Outside, carriage wheels hiss through wet streets. Inside, science performs obedience in the name of care. Stop 6, the Lock Hospital, where morality smells like poison. Closer to dawn, the city's hidden costs become impossible to perfume. In the wards of the Lock Hospital, suffering loses all refinement. Rows of beds crowd the room. Curtains are scarce. Air is stale, hot, sour with sweat, chemicals, unclean linen, and something metallic beneath it all. Patients lie too close together, coughing, groaning, whispering, staring. The weak light makes everyone look already half withdrawn from the world. Many of the women here were not brought by compassion. They were brought by suspicion, arrest, regulation, coercion. On the street, a woman merely believed to be a prostitute can be stopped, examined, recorded, controlled. The man who infected her may continue dining in comfort, return home to his wife, preserve his name, keep his place in society intact. This is how Victorian law defines morality, not by harm, by status. Treatment here is often worse than the disease itself. Mercury is rubbed into skin, swallowed, inhaled. It burns slowly through the body. Teeth loosen. Gums blacken. Breath turns foul. Pain deepens. Faces begin to change shape. The cure enters like a punishment and refuses to leave. A woman sits by a chipped mirror, patting white powder over sores near her nose. The gesture is almost unbearably human. One last attempt to appear presentable. One last attempt to preserve the fiction that damage can still be hidden if applied carefully enough. Around her, the ward offers no privacy, no dignity, no real hope. Victorian London likes to say vice leads to ruin, but so often it is society's response that completes the ruin. Not sex alone, not illness alone, judgment armed with institutions. That is what fills this room. The women here are not symbols. They are not warnings. They are people broken at the exact point where desire, poverty, law, and ignorance intersect. And somewhere in another part of the city, a gentleman who helped create this misery sleeps soundly in clean sheets. No police knock at his door. No hospital ledger owns his future. No one calls him fallen. Stop 7. The raid before dawn. There are still a few hours before sunrise. In a side street, hidden behind an ordinary frontage, a molly house is alive with the fragile relief of men who can breathe openly only when the door is bolted. Voices are softer here, but not silent. Someone laughs. Someone sings under his breath. Someone finally sits without fear of being watched for the wrong gesture, the wrong hand movement, the wrong softness in the eyes. For a little while, the room feels almost safe. Then the door crashes open. The raid is fast, violent, rehearsed. Boots pound the floorboards. Lantern light jolts across faces turning white with terror. Orders are shouted. Hands seize collars, wrists, shoulders. Men are dragged into the open before they have even fully understood that the moment has ended. There is no need for violence from the accused. No theft. No assault. No victim in the ordinary sense. It is enough that they are here. Enough that they exist in the wrong arrangement. Enough that their desire is visible without the shield of wealth, marriage, or acceptable silence. Outside, the cold bites harder just before dawn. Prison carts wait. The arrested men lower their faces as neighbors gather, staring from windows and doorways, with the avid moral hunger crowds so often mistake for righteousness. The law will describe this as cleansing, as order, as protection. But the law is not protecting the vulnerable. It is protecting a social script. In Victorian London, punishment falls hardest, not on those who create harm, but on those whose desires expose the lie that respectable society tells about itself. The city is exhausted now. Coal smoke hangs low. The lamps are burning out. Milk carts begin to appear in the distance, moving through streets that will soon belong to daylight again. And daylight changes everything. The evidence vanishes into institutions. The shame settles where power wants it to settle. The newspapers will speak carefully. The courts will speak sternly. The city will resume its posture. Morning returns, but the lie remains perfectly dressed. Dawn creeps over London as if nothing happened. Market carts roll in. Shopkeepers lift shutters. Maids scrub steps. Clerks button coats. The same city that spent the night buying, selling, punishing, diagnosing, concealing, and destroying now washes its face and calls itself moral once more. That is the real genius of Victorian respectability. Not innocence. Recovery. Its ability to commit hypocrisy at night and speak of virtue by breakfast. By day, the brothel becomes rumor. The hospital becomes charity. The police raid becomes justice. The clinic becomes science. The hungry girl in 7 Dials becomes a cautionary tale. The wealthy client becomes invisible. The arrested man becomes depravity itself. And so the empire keeps its conscience clean by assigning dirt downward. This is why Victorian London is not just a story about sex. It is a story about power, deciding who gets privacy, who gets punishment, who gets treatment, who gets believed, and who gets erased. They did not live in a less sexual world. They lived in a world less honest about sex, a world with less knowledge, less protection, less mercy, and more confidence in its own righteousness. That is what made it dangerous. And that is why this history still feels uncomfortably close. Because the masks have changed, but the instinct behind them has not vanished. Wealth still buys discretion. Exploitation still learns new language. Shame still lands hardest on those with the least power to resist it. Society still prefers polished surfaces to difficult truths. The fog lifts slowly from the rooftops. The city brightens. Nothing on these streets announces what the night contained. No sign above a doorway says, "Hypocrisy lived here." No plaque says silence destroyed lives here. No portrait says suffering stood just outside the frame. But it did. It was all here. Behind the high collars, behind the sermons, behind the polished manners, behind the idea of civilization itself. And that may be the coldest truth of all. Not that Victorian London was secretly depraved, but that it was openly cruel while insisting it was pure. Subscribe to the channel so we can explore new lands and historical periods together in our upcoming videos.